Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Primary day has turned into primary night, and right now we're bringing you special Decision 2020 coverage. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Curtis.
And I'm Kariva Devine. Election season is in full swing right now, with the polls closing here in Arizona just about right now, actually, at 7 o'clock.
All right, this has been called sort of the pandemic primary, an election unlike any other as the state wrestles with coronavirus concerns for people going to the polls and our excessive heat.
That's right. Team 12's Bram Resnick, political insider, is joining us now with some of the key races to watch. And Bram, we're still waiting for the results to come in. Obviously, the polls just closed about a minute ago or so, but there is a pretty incredible number that we're already hearing about.
Yeah, that's right, Caribe. The first results should come in about 8 p.m. The number we're talking about is 95%. That's the estimated percentage of voters in this primary here in Maricopa County who cast their ballot or showed up at voting centers before the polls opened this morning. So that's about 5% of all voters in this election, in this primary, basically turned out or dropped off their ballot today. That is a historic low for any primary. At the same time, there were a historic number of votes cast in this election. Voters have been able to cast their ballots by mail or in person at new voting centers for almost 4 weeks. Those voting centers were opened to cut down on large crowds the day of the election to help make social distancing easier. And Mark and Caribe, it appeared it's been working pretty well. We've heard no reports of any problems today, a little blip here or there. I've covered 8 elections going back almost 15 years. I can't recall an election on election day when somebody didn't call me up, message me and say, hey, something's wrong, check this out. I heard none of that today. So you have to say a lot of credit goes to Maricopa County Board, Maricopa County elections officials who've run this election. So far, so good. The key will come tonight about 8 p.m. When the first results come out, and many of those results should basically be final because they will be about 95% of all votes cast. Now, let's go to some of the statewide races we're looking at in Arizona and Washington, D.C. in particular. A lot of eyes on the Republican Senate primary. Senator Martha McSally, a heavy favorite against businessman and first-time candidate Daniel McCarthy. Any sign of McSally weakness in this race, this primary, might raise more doubts among top Republicans about whether she can win the seat in November against Democrat Mark Kelly. And an oldie but goodie, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, still on the ballot, but this could be his last hurrah. He's running for sheriff. He wants his old job back. Now let's send it over to you guys.
Bram, I was going to ask you, being that it seemed so successful today, that we had those early drop-off locations and things went really smoothly, as far as we can tell, do you see this being somehow maybe something that we could see for the general election?
Well, this is what's so interesting, because what the pandemic allowed here was County Recorder Adrian Fontes has very specific ideas. When he was elected in 2016, he said, we want to do away with day of voting as much as we can. And that's what happened in this election, because the county had to put in place all these measures to deal with the pandemic, such as 100 voting centers where you could vote, you could cast a ballot, whether you had a mail-in ballot or not. You can do that any time after July 8th, all the way up to today. So really there was no need to go to a polling place, and there are lots of people who love going to polling places. Those voting centers allowed them to do it, and especially given the pandemic, to do it safely. So, you know, where we stand right now, and you threw a caution up, and I'll throw a caution up as well, because there could be a long night ahead of us. But as of now, we have to presume this will be in place in November, and could be a model for running a very successful and very safe election.
Bram, we know that Arizona is in play, and if you want evidence of that, look no further than Vice President Mike Pence coming back to Arizona for the second time in just a couple of weeks. He announced today that he's coming here next week, and yet we have not seen former Vice President Joe Biden.
We haven't seen former Vice President Joe Biden. Joe Biden really hasn't traveled many places. There's the joke, of course, that he's in his bunker in Delaware. He has done Zooms. He did one with you, Mark, a couple weeks ago. That's been the extent of his getting out and about. That said, I'm not sure Mike Pence is the person Republicans really want to see. They want to see the president, and we don't see him getting out all that much either. Nevertheless, just look at what's on your TV screen. The ads from the Biden campaign, the ads for the Trump campaign, they're going head-to-head in Arizona right now on TV, on social media. They're going to be spending a lot of money. I think that's where most of us are going to see them.
And look, it's only 7 o'clock, a little after 7, and we don't expect any results to come in until just after 8 when we get that first vote dump. But when you look at the playing field here on this primary day, do you see or expect any upsets?
That's a good question. Upsets, I don't know. I mentioned Martha McSally's race. For her, if Daniel McCarthy gets a 35% or more of the vote, that would have to be considered maybe a bit of an upset. He loses, but that's more than you'd expect a Daniel McCarthy, a first-time candidate, to get against a Martha McSally who's been in office for about 6, 7 years now. Has been a senator for a little over a year and a half, I guess. So that would be a kind of upset for Daniel McCarthy. He represents a lot of Republicans, a real base Republican who doesn't believe Martha McSally is faithful enough to what Donald Trump wants to do, to what the base Republicans want her to do. She's pretty faithful, but they don't see it that way, and that's the vote he's going after. And one thing we have learned over time is the base has gotten more basey, if that makes sense. The Trump voter is more of a Trump voter as time has gone on, as the presidents remain in office. So that's a possibility. There's a northern Arizona district, Sylvia Allen. If you follow the state legislature, she's quite well known there, Senator Sylvia Allen. She faces a tough race. If she loses, that would be an upset and could help shift control of the Senate. Joe Arpaio losing, he's up, he's 88 years old, wants his old job back. That would not be an upset. He's run twice in the last 4 years and lost.
Who is he up against, Bram?
Yeah, so Joe Arpaio is running against his former top deputy, Jerry Sheridan, as well as another law enforcement officer and I believe a fourth person, a write-in candidate. Neither of them have a sterling history, Joe Arpaio or Jerry Sheridan. They would be a really tough sell on a general election ballot. I think if you ask most Republicans, they're quite happy with Paul Penzone, the current sheriff, a Democrat, but he hasn't really sounded a lot like a Democrat. He's been a law and order sheriff and tried to downplay any party affiliation. But this could be the last hurrah for 88-year-old Joe Arpaio tonight.
Do we know anything about a rift between Sheridan and Arpaio? Because they were joined at the hip for many, many years, Bram.
I don't know about a rift. They were certainly joined at the hip, having covered the racial profiling lawsuit filed by the federal government. Filed by local plaintiffs, by Latino citizens who had their rights violated. Jerry Sheridan and Joe Arpaio were joined at the hip in that lawsuit. Joe Arpaio, of course, found guilty of criminal contempt, avoided serving any jail time by President Trump's pardon. It seems they're joined at the hip. Jerry Sheridan trying to separate himself now. Joe Arpaio was really not super close to that many people, if anybody, in the sheriff's department. Jerry Sheridan trying to be his own man. It'll be tough for him to make a case because he has a lot of the same burdens that Arpaio would have in a general election. And don't forget, Arpaio, when he ran in 2016, Penzone beat him by the largest margin of any candidate who ran countywide. So that was a pretty tough defeat for Joe Arpaio.
And real quickly, David Schweikert's seat. We saw him brought up on ethics charges. How much does that put his seat in jeopardy?
That's a really good question. There's a 4-person Democratic primary tonight, which will let Schweikert know who his opponent will be in November. Carl Gent is up on your screen, are the 4 candidates. Carl Gentles on the left, Anita Malik next to him, she ran against Schweikert in 2018, lost by 10 points. Hiro Tiperneni, second from the right, she ran in CD8, a neighboring district, in 2018 and lost, and then decided to run in CD6. She doesn't quite live inside the district. She is the favorite to win tonight, and Stephanie Rimmer on your right. She's a local activist. So it appears to be Tipper Nanny, like the likely winner. She has proved to be a very proficient fundraiser, very important in these kinds of races. And as you mentioned, David Schweikert has admitted to 11 ethics violations, paid a $50,000 fine, and in a very rare move, the House of Representatives unanimously reprimanded him for his behavior.
Okay.
It's a really tough report. He could have a tough time.
Okay, Bram, we're going to sign off here in a few minutes here. When do you expect poll numbers to start coming in? Oh, okay, I think we lost Bram, but either way, we want to thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be back with more live coverage around 8 o'clock, and that's, again, when we're expecting those numbers to start coming in. So we'll be tracking all of the latest results all evening long. You can check us out on 12news.com, also our free 12 News app if you haven't already downloaded. And of course, we'll be looking ahead to the November matchups on 12 News at 10. We'll see you back then, everyone.